Go ahead, Varda.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Varda Barkar, and this is the first time I'm being a host, so forgive me for the delayed entry. My name is Varda Barkar. I'm a filmmaker and a board member of NewFilmmakers Los Angeles. Telefilm Canada and NewFilmmakers LA have partnered together to present a series of panels built to provide access and insight for Canadian filmmakers and creatives around the process of qualifying and campaigning for the Oscars. We're excited to kick off this session with a special message from our partners at Telefilm Canada.
Welcome to the NewFilmmakers Los Angeles Film Festival. Telefilm Canada is a proud partner of the NewFilmmakers LA, and we are thrilled to support the In Focus programs with an emphasis on Canadian cinema's features and shorts. Telefilm Canada is a crown corporation dedicated to the promotion, financing, and development of Canada's film industry. The global market plays a huge role in the success of Canadian films, and year over year, we support Canadian features and shorts as they navigate their way through award season. Today's panels are being presented in an effort to shed light on navigating an Oscars campaign. These panels explore relevant topics, including award season press, publicity, qualifying exhibition, both through film festivals and through theatrical runs. Please enjoy the panel discussion.
Well, we want to again thank Telefilm Canada for their partnership to make today's sessions possible. This panel is entitled Exposure to the Press, a conversation on award season coverage. Before we get started, though, I'd like to acknowledge that this evening's discussion is a safe space for everyone, regardless of your background. You are all welcome here. Today's session will kick off a 60-minute moderator-led discussion with our esteemed panelists. Throughout this conversation, we encourage you to use the chat to comment and interact about the items being covered. Please turn on your video to maximize engagement. And through the videos, we get to connect. It's a wonderful thing to do. Following our moderator-led discussion, we will turn it around to you, our audience member, for a 30-minute interactive audience and panelist Q&A. In order to ask a question during the Q&A, simply use the raised hand feature, which is available under the Reactions tab. Clicking the raised hand button will place you in a queue in order to ask your question. When it is your turn, a NewFilmmaker LA staff member will unmute you. Please make sure you've also unmuted yourself and limit yourself to 1 or 2 questions max. We recommend writing down any questions you have throughout the discussion, which can be asked during the Q&A. If you don't have a microphone, simply chat us your question to NewFilmmakers LA and we'll ask it for you. Please also be sure to mind your video background and audio throughout the session. As it's interactive, we ask that you remain aware that you're on camera if your video is turned on. I also want to mention that unfortunately, Scott Feinberg won't be able to attend today, but we're pleased to be joined by Claudia Puig at the LA Film Critics Association and Clayton Davis at Variety. And with that, let's get started.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. Hi, Claudia. Hi, Clayton. Claudia, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello again.
Hello. Well, it's great to have you both here. And before we start, let's just let's talk a little bit, each of you, about how you got into being a critic or reviewing films and what you see as your purpose. How do you serve the community, the film community, the entertainment community through your work?
Ladies first, please, Claudia.
Well, I got into it. First of all, I'm going to do that backwards. I see my work as being an advocate for films. And I've said before, the critics we have a little bit of like a missionary zeal, to promote films that we not promote, but to get the word out about films that we think are fantastic, especially little scene films, smaller films, independent films that might not be getting the sort of attention, could go under the radar. Maybe don't have big studios backing them. So that is sort of how I see myself, as a film champion and a curator. And how I got into it, I was a journalist, and I've always been a cinephile. Since I was a little girl, I was raised on foreign films by a cinephile father and a mother who loved classic American films. So, I went to Fellini films as a very young girl, probably too young when I think back on it now. It was, just so movies have kind of just been in my life. And but then I kind of came at it from the journalistic. There's almost two ways you can do it. You go to film school and be a filmmaker and become a critic, or you can do it via journalism. And so I worked for the LA Times for 11 years. And then I went to work for USA Today for 18 years and became a film critic about 20 years ago. So, and I love it. It's, I still think it's the best job because, who pays you to go to movies? I mean, how great is that? And when you love something, you really love it. And when you don't love something, you have the opportunity to let people know that as well. So that's how I came to it, and that's how I approach it.
Wonderful. Thank you. How about you, Clayton?
Besides wanting to be like Claudia when I grew up, that was mostly my angle. But no, honestly, I grew up on the East Coast. I'm from the Bronx. And lived my life. I'm very much an East Coast boy. I've been in LA literally a month in like 4 days. Like I've never lived anywhere else but the East Coast. And I didn't know I could be a critic. I fell into this kind of by accident. I knew I loved movies and I knew I was passionate about them, but I always say I'm a product of why education in urban areas are not just important, but crucial. So people like myself can find it much sooner than when I did. So, I mean, the only thing I could really say when I was a kid, I said I wanted to be an actor because it was the only thing I could physically see on screen. I knew I loved movies and I was like, oh, I'll be an actor. And, went through high school, kept saying it. And then when I got to college, I was lost the entire time because the school I went to didn't have acting. And I didn't know how to kind of decipher my love for movies. I just, and then a lot of people kept telling me, like, you want to be an actor, you need a backup plan. And college was me trying to figure out what that backup plan was going to be. But at the age of 19, there was a website called the Oscar Igloo. It was this guy that was going to USC, and he was writing about the Oscars, and I watched the Oscars a lot my entire life, and I knew I was kind of passionate about that as well. And he put like an APB out for some writers, and to this day, I'll never know why he took me because I've read what I wrote back then, and it's atrocious. But I remember throwing my hat in the ring. And he said, yeah, you can write for me for a little bit. And I did that for like 3 years. And then he was from Portugal. He ended up moving back to Portugal. Can't cover Hollywood from Portugal. So he asked if I wanted to take it over. And at the age of, 23-ish years old, I rebranded it and called it awardcircuit.com and thought that was my only avenue to get into journalism in Hollywood because I didn't major in journalism. I majored in American Studies, which is AKA just vague diploma stuff to get you out of college. And then, for 12 years, I ran that website. Wow. And also worked a day job. This is the first time I've been at Variety now. It's going to be a year this September. This is the first time in my adult life I've only worked one job. the entire time. So when I say I fell into this by accident, like I really fell into this by accident. I was able to know that I loved movies. I liked writing about them, not necessarily wanting to be in them. And I mean, that's kind of how my story goes. And I've been very inspired by a lot of the trailblazers and OGs in this space, and look up to all of them because I know I'm still learning at this point, in my career.
Incredible. Well, I just want to recognize before we actually start, speaking about the subject, which is, press, publicity, and, the Oscars, the awards season. I just want to recognize something that's really important and critical about this conversation. And that is that our relationship, like me as a filmmaker and you guys, people who write about film, how intricately connected we are. And it makes me think about that saying, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there, does anyone hear it? I feel like you are the ears. You are like the conduit, that makes it possible for people to hear the film, to know that it's out there, to know where, and people really look to you both to know what to see, to know what to watch. So we're intricately connected. And that's true of all the filmmakers here. And I think that that's just very important. And this is like the underpinning for this whole conversation. So I just want to recognize that. I want to thank you for the work that you do and, express my appreciation for that. As a filmmaker myself.
Because I think that's a lot of times people see it as a bit of an adversarial relationship. We're there to, just the word critic, right? Like we're there to criticize. We're there to sort of take things apart, and it's not adversarial at all. We're on the same side. We all want great films to be seen by the most amount of people and to be loved and to be embraced. And so thank you for seeing it that way, because that is, that's how we see it. And it's painful to have to write a bad review of something, right? I'd much prefer to write, something that encourages people to go see something. So
yeah, and to add to that, I think a lot of the perception that gets put out there is we are the filmmakers that didn't make it, so now we're bitter and want to write about how bad everything else is, and a lot of that, gets fit into like some narratives.
We're like in TV, like the anti-ego character,
Yep. But like, I think you bring up a good point, and this has been interesting throughout my life, and even now my career now. When I tell people I love the Oscars, but then they also know I'm one that writes a lot about diversity and representation, they don't see that connection because obviously the Oscars have had a lot of missteps in that. But I'm of the mind that the Oscars matter, not just what they nominate, but what they don't. Like the great story of Citizen Kane losing to How Green Is My Valley. Like, no one's ever going to get it right all the time. And there are people that will discover movies like I would have never watched Citizen Kane or How Green Was My Valley if it hadn't been nominated for an Academy Award. Like it's their snapshot of a time in history. People forget a lot of those things a lot of the time. How Green Was My Valley, it won Best Picture I think it was like 2-3 months after they bombed Pearl Harbor. Everyone was in a soldier mood and pro-America, and like we got, it speaks to a time in our history. One of the great things we'll always debate for the rest of time is, does Moonlight still win Best Picture if Trump loses the presidency, the first time? Because everything feels like it's directly connected. But I just want to say, like, the connection piece is important, and I acknowledge that, and that's why everything's so connected all throughout the industry with all the arts.
Absolutely. So on that note, thank you for being here in support of the filmmakers. And my first question to you is, how do you had mentioned, in our conversation a few minutes ago that there's already a posting of possible Oscar contenders. At what point should a film, well, first of all, how do you discover, how do you find those films? Because now it's kind of early. You're almost almost like creating the buzz rather than kind of following it, starting this early. So how do you find those films? How do you recognize those ones, up to both of you, that you feel are starting to kind of line up?
Yeah, and let me start with, it's always too early. Like everyone, like a lot of these haven't been seen by anyone. Some of them aren't even finished shooting yet.
Wow.
But my job here as an awards editor is to, first of all, know the Academy history, know the trends, know what they tend to go for, but also challenge them. The great thing about going early is that you can recommend a narrative for an Oscar voter to go and seek out. The pandemic was hard on everyone, but this year's nominations and winners was the product of what happens when campaigning is, and like the in the room rubbing elbows part of campaigning is removed from it, and it's about the movies, because everyone was home and they all watched the movies. And I think this crop of nominees, we saw diversity in the aspect of people. When I say diversity, a lot of people think, oh, we need Blacks and Latinos, and yes, that is part of what I'm talking about. But Nomadland was super diverse. It was the story of the Trump voter told by an Asian woman. That's diversity. That's representation. You know, so yes, you are creating the buzz, but I see it as recommendations. Like when this comes down the line, go and seek it out. When I did my year in advance predictions, I put a documentary in Best Picture. We still have not had a documentary nominated for Best Picture yet, but I'm hoping that I'm going to be alive to see it one day, and that they should be considered in that way. So that's how I see my part of the gig. Claudia?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do think this year was really unique in that a lot of smaller pictures really rose to the fore. Certainly, you know, we were talking about Moonlight, which is one of my favorite films of all time. I would like to think that it would win under any circumstances, but you know, we have seen some small films obviously rise to the fore. But this year, I mean, arguably all of the nominees, with the exception of maybe a couple, were smaller films, smaller budgeted, more intimate films. I think of a movie like Minari, which was actually my favorite of this year's films. I'm not sure that film would have risen to the level, would have risen to the awards level. It was obviously a wonderful film and should have, but it could easily have been forgotten. As happens every year, there's those little gems that you wish, you know, maybe they get a screenwriting nomination, maybe they don't, but, you know, or they get Independent Spirit nominations, but they just don't make it to the level where people, you know, they hit that critical mass where they get nominated. So I feel like this was a really great year in that respect. And consequently, because of that, we saw all the other diversity that comes with, you know, the filmmakers that we want to hear from. We want to hear original stories, and that means an unusual voice. Oftentimes, a person of color, or a woman, or somebody who is outside of the mainstream. So this has been I think, a really great year for independent films, and for those small films, for those gems, for quality, for things that work on a smaller screen too. Let's face it, everybody saw them, you know, saw films on a smaller screen. But I do, you know, you can't underestimate the power of zeitgeist too. And I think you're right about Nomadland. I mean, I think it spoke to us at a time when, you know, we're hurting during the pandemic, and we're hurting financially and all of that.
Yeah, and I always acknowledge, if it was a regular season, like normal stakes, I don't think Nomadland wins Best Picture. It might still get nominated, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't, because the narrative changes. When I talk about reflection of the time, like it really does. And I think what people tend to forget, it's okay if I like something and you don't, or you hate what I like. Like it's art. Art is subjective all the time. My favorite film of the last decade, 2010s, we all did our list. My favorite film of the decade wasn't even nominated for Best Picture, and it was If Beale Street Could Talk, which is Barry Jenkins' follow-up to Moonlight. I think it's his masterpiece. Wow. And that might be like a hot take, and people don't, but it's okay that I think that. Just like it's okay if you may think Moonlight is not a good movie. That's okay too.
I've never met that person, and I hope never to meet them.
I know they're not. They're going to be here right now. But no, I want us to be able to, to the film. The cinematic language is the only. I feel like art is the only language that we all speak. It's the only way we can communicate, because that's why no matter where you're from in the world, if you see a piece of art, whether it's movies, music, television, sculptures, paintings, whatever, you're still able to identify and get something from it. And it's the only piece of anything that we can all communicate through. And that's why it's really, really important that we keep those conversations going.
And yeah. We all feel very emotionally about you. It's funny you have one of those movies. I have a movie like that too. I don't know if it's my absolute favorite because Moonlight is right up there, but there was a movie that came out a couple years ago called Waves by Trey Edward Schultz.
Love that. Love Waves.
Oh, and if it had come out this year, we might have seen it, be rise to the level to, to use the wave metaphor, to be on the edge of the curl or whatever. But yeah, we didn't. And, great performances by Kelvin Harrison Jr. and Lucas Hedges and Taylor Russell. And
Taylor Russell.
Everybody who's ever seen that movie, most people have said, oh my God, I love that movie. But it just went under the radar. And sometimes that's just heartbreaking. I have another role that I play as a programmer for film festivals. And so those films that I love, I get to promote by putting them in film festivals. So I love that. But I think we all have those movies that we just champion and love, and who, they sometimes don't make it to the pinnacle. But
so I have a question, and actually Larry suggested I ask this and make it personal. I have a film called Fandango at the Wall that was released last year. It was picked up by HBO. It aired on HBO, and it had a little theatrical release as well in Atlanta. Now it's on HBO Max. And we were a very small team. We were very, very delayed in getting a PR team, involved. We were kind of going to bootstrap it and do it ourselves, and then suddenly realized, with the Academy, we did submit it, and it was in consideration. So what could we have done? What would you say? We got, reviews and stuff, but not like you guys, like the top reviewers, and critics. So what could we have done to get your attention? It seemed very difficult to do that. I couldn't quite crack the code.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Where you mentioned that it got a theatrical release in Atlanta, HBO Max is a great place. Did it play at film festivals, a lot of them, or?
It did. Actually, it was invited to be the opening night film for the Santa Barbara Film Festival. Oh. Unfortunately, it was still a work in progress at that time, and it's a music documentary, and the sound hadn't even been mixed yet, and I just felt we would be shooting ourselves in the foot. But then it was at the Atlanta Film Festival, CineQuest, tons of, a lot of different festivals. It was not in Tribeca or Sundance or South by Southwest. Would that have made a difference, do you think?
That might have made a difference, yeah. Telluride, Tribeca, Sundance, South by Southwest, opposite Toronto. Even Santa Barbara could have made a difference. That's too bad that the timing didn't work for you, because, I think that's how things get seen. That's how you get word of mouth, because we're seeing a lot of stuff. When I say we, I mean critics. But there are critics, who do go to CineQuest or who do go to Santa Barbara or, various festivals. Of course, there's local ones who would go to Atlanta. But the more you can get it out there, that's how the word of mouth begins. I know you probably get this, Clayton. I know I've gotten it for years, where people will just send you a film and say, could you review it? Yeah. And you can't review something unless you are reviewing it for the publication that you work for. I can't just say, yes, hi, I'm Claudia, I'm reviewing, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes when I went to USA Today, it needed to have a theatrical, it was like a chicken or the egg kind of thing. It needed to have a theatrical release for me to review it. If it didn't have a theatrical release, I couldn't review it. So, you run into those issues. So that makes it really hard to champion a film if you haven't had the opportunity to see it. So I guess my advice is to get it out there in as many places as you can. that's about the most you can do, and then the word of mouth builds from there.
Yeah, and to add to that, and the same way that the Oscars work, I mean, the Oscars are, I think now officially after the new class that was just added, they're over 10,000 members, or they're right around 10,000 people that are now members of the Academy. Larger groups yield consensus, and it's always hard to get, you know, those smaller films recognized. I felt like, you know, look at the last like 7 years of IFC Films slate. You know, they have some of the best films on the planet, and if I show any general movie Joe Schmo, they probably haven't heard of any of them. And what happens is, what always kind of puts people like Claudia and I in this predicament is, last year the Oscars, the films that were in consideration was 366 films. It was the most films eligible since 1970. So, you know, every year I'm watching maybe between 125, 175. A couple times I've cleared 200. And there's some people that will say they've watched 300 films, but I know Claudia's like this, so I'm going to have her join me on this. When I watch a film, I really want to give it the time, and like watching so many films in a day can be very tiresome. And so much, distributors matter. You obviously you found a distributor for your film, but word of mouth matters, and it's still about dollars and cents, unfortunately. I was going
to ask you about that.
Yeah, so when you look at our publications, like again, with my Academy, you know, larger group yields consensus. You know, LA Times and Variety are the most read trade, you know, and newspapers in the country. You know, you have to also get into what's, you know, people are actually going to read. There have been some things I've written that I'm really passionate about. They've gotten maybe like 300 clicks. Like, no one read it because no one really cares like about those subjects. I do, and we can get all those things out, but you know, you have to, you know, kind of balance your time and what you can do. But that doesn't mean we stop wanting to find those smaller films, because we will, but there are a lot of, you know, small fish in a pond, to give a really cheesy analogy.
Well, that's where publicists come in. I do think that it's worth, you know, there's a handful of really good indie publicists. That's what they focus on. We know them, they know us. And so they know what our taste is. They know, you know, for both Clayton and I, you know, diversity is a particular issue. I'm Latina. So, you know, if something is from Latin America, I might have you know, I have an interest in a lot of films, but they would know, oh, let's talk to her, you know, or let's talk to him. And so they know who to approach and how to approach them and say, well, this reminds me a little bit of Roma. I know you love Roma, or something like that, you know, and that gets our attention, because it's really hard, as Clayton pointed out, you know, there's just so many movies out there. It's hard to know exactly what, you know, to get that attention. So it does help, and it's probably worth the money spent. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But I think it might be worth it. I look at a film like a couple of years ago. There was a movie called Diane that was put out by IFC. Mary Kay Place starred in it, and Jake Lacey, and we at the LA Film Critics gave her Best Actress, Mary Kay Place. Nobody saw that film, although I will say that Obama put it on his list of
wow.
Yeah. So he may have heard it from us, who knows? But I do think that, you know, critics groups, and I don't say this just because I am president of the LA Film Critics, I said this before, but critics groups can help with that too. You know, like the word, like, you know, if you look on Wikipedia, it'll say that we gave it Best Actress, and maybe somebody will see it because of that. People always ask, you know, people ask me, do critics matter? And in the individual, probably not so much. What I think, or what, well, maybe not Clayton, but what, you know, what many of us think individually is not going to make that big of a change. I think since the days of Roger Ebert, there hasn't been that kind of clout in with one person. However, the aggregate, you know, what a critics group thinks, to have that stamp from the New York Film Critics or the Chicago Film Critics or whoever, that is where, you know, a lot can build from there. So that can happen when you have a publicist and they someone writes a story in the LA Times or in Variety or wherever about a particular film, and that makes somebody want to rush out and see it. Or, you know, there's a lot of pieces of this puzzle.
And people do discover things later. You know, everyone, like, you know, movies come out of the time, but, you know, cult classic, you know, Rocky Horror Picture Show is awesome today. It was not awesome that year that it came out, and you get traction and notoriety from it. So I'll refer to one thing that I heard Viola Davis say. I interviewed her last year, and she said something that like kind of slapped me in the face. And she goes, I was asking her about acting, and she goes, most people want to be famous actors, and then other people want to be actors. And there's a balance that people need, you know, when they're trying to get, you don't understand how many times Claudia and I will hear someone pitch us and they're like, it's a great movie. Marketing still matters in the end. Like, what is, like, you know, sometimes distributors don't know how to do it. Publicists are not always great at it, especially if it's an underrepresented group. You know, that's why we need more. That's why the diversity problem is not just Academy, it's movies, it's publicity, it's education in schools, like it's all across the board. But, you know, having the right voices to talk about your film that can still be accessible to all is largely important. And, you know, people overlook that too often.
So I just want to clarify one thing. I think that you said, Claudia, for me to understand, for all the listeners to understand, when you were saying if someone sent you a link and said, "Would you watch my film?" that you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. How does it work? Are you given an assignment where it says, you know, go to Tribeca, and like, how does it work? How do you select the films that you watch, and how connected is that with like your assignment, or, you know, the periodical that you're working for, or, you know, how does that work?
Yeah. So, and this might vary from publication to publication. I'll just speak for myself. When I was working at USA Today, for instance, they're a very populist kind of newspaper. They were all about celebrities. So I was always having to fight to get like a documentary or a foreign film, you know, in our list of reviews. And sometimes I won, sometimes I lost. But, you know, I'd say, well, but this is, you know, this is about Anthony Bourdain. Well, that one they'd probably do. But, you know, you'd have to really, you know, give a good reason. When you go to a film festival, when I go to a film festival, I try to see as much as I possibly can. Even if the mandate from where I was working would be, you know, go see that movie with Ryan Reynolds. Well, yes, I'll see that, but I'll also see this little known, you know, Thai movie or something, because that's who I am. I want to see those. And then if I see something that I really like, I'll try to pitch it. I'll find an angle somehow to pitch it. Sometimes you'll be successful with your editor. Sometimes you will not. Things have changed in terms of, you know, you could blog about things, you could tweet about things, you can do, there are ways that you can get around that, you know, not being allowed to write an article or review, you could tweet. So I think social media has broadened that for a lot of us. But yeah, you are constrained by, you know, if someone were to send me a link for a film, it doesn't mean that it's not that I can't watch it. I'm not, you know, forbidden from watching it. I can watch it, but it's not going to do the person a lot of good, because you know, unless I'm watching it for a publication, my watching it doesn't mean much of anything. So I guess I didn't exactly clarify that. But in terms of it getting the most eyes and the most attention, you know, you really, maybe it depends. If you have a blog and a lot of people are following that, if you have, you know, Clayton could speak to that, having worked, you know, on a website. I've only worked for 2 major publications, so I'm limited by what those publications want, but there's a lot of other ways. So maybe Clayton can.
Yeah. What I think one thing that gets lost a lot sometimes is the finite time a person has in a day. So I think there's an average of, I think it's on IMDb, about 2,500 films are produced each year. 2,500. Everyone knows the song from Rent, 525,600 minutes, right? There's how many minutes there are in a year. The average movie is about 120 minutes. We're gonna say it's 2 hours. That's, if you gave every waking second, every second of your year, that's 4,380 films. But now, assuming you know, sleep 8 hours a day, that leaves you 1,480. Like, throwing math, and this is not my strong suit, but it's just, you know, there's just so much that someone can do. And it's not just watching. One of the greatest misconceptions about our job is that it's easy. Like that is the one that will always ding me, because they're like, you watch movies all day, how can that be hard? Like, all right, great, now watch the movies and then write about them. And film festivals obviously is condensed as well. Again, it's marketing, it's getting the word out. Word of mouth matters. And that's why when I do like an early prediction thing, like some people will see it as like, oh, you're just like highlighting the big studio stuff and not the smaller things, which I try to do. But there's just a finite number of things, and you need not only do you need enough people to watch it, but then you need enough people to watch it and then love it. It's hard to get an Academy Award nomination, and it should be. Top 5 of anything is hard. I don't know how many valedictorians there are on this call. I wasn't one of them. I was pretty far down the line. So, like a lot of, that's
you don't wonder sometimes like how something made it to that top 5, because it's not that. So there is some politicking there.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of undeserving nominees and winners.
Yeah.
Varda, I just want to add one thing too. I should have said this before. So I work for KPCC. I do Film Week, which is NPR, and that's a different animal. So for instance, if I go to Telluride or I go to Sundance and I see something I really love, even though I will have to wait until it has some kind of opening and platform in Los Angeles, I could speak to Larry Mantle, or I could speak to John Horner, I could speak to somebody there and say, hey, you should, look at this film, maybe talk to the filmmaker. There are ways to get, and NPR has a huge audience, and KPC is like the largest public radio station here. So, those are other ways to kind of get the word out. It doesn't always, I guess I'm saying that there's other possibilities, there's other ways to be creative. And I think that is where, sometimes we as reporters or as journalists can carry that mantle and, fight that fight. But as Clayton points out, there's only so many hours in the day and we have lives. So that's where the publicists, that you find someone who really believes in your film and loves it and will fight that fight for you.
So at what stage would you say filmmakers should start thinking about that, about like building an audience, getting the word out? Because I know one piece of advice that I received was be very cautious about that, because you don't want to do it too soon, because once it's been written about, right? Once people have, spent time writing about it, when you get closer to the campaign, now they've already done it. So they're not necessarily going to want to write about it again, but yet you want to be like, sounds like blowing into a fire to get it to burn.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking award strategy, and that's literally like it's the most glamorous, well-paying job, but also it is the most stressful, because there's no rhyme or reason of when to strike. That you can peak too early, you can blow it here and blow it there. I just saw a film out of Cannes, Blue Bayou from Justin Chon, which I adore, and I would write all about it right now, like if I could, and say, let me get the filmmaker on, I want to get the word out. But if Focus Features is looking for this to be an awards player, it's July 15th and the Oscars are on March 27th. So there's a lot of time. Things get forgotten, and at the end of the day, it's 10,000 people. You really never know what works and what doesn't until the nominations are revealed. And then there are some that like just happen without doing anything. We saw that in some Emmy nominees this year.
It's so ephemeral that way. I mean, I look back to the year where Green Book won, which I think shocked so many of us. It looked like it was Roma had it slam dunk. And
Black Klansman, wasn't it that year? It was
Black Klansman. Was that up for Best Picture though?
Yeah, that was up that year.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a crazy year, or not a crazy year. There were a few possibilities, but people had already sort of crowned the possibilities, and they, Green Book was not in it. Green Book was so divisive, and the way it all, we'll never know how close these other ones came. But I think people got tired of hearing maybe too much about Roma or too much about Black Klansman or whatever, and they, maybe there was too much discussion too early, or the timing wasn't quite right. I remember when I was at Telluride in September, Roma was already getting crowned, and that was September, 6 months before. So it feels like it's such a, it's so not necessary. I mean, Nomadland was the one that everyone was predicting. Everybody knew that was going to win, and it did. So that does happen. But then there's
it also comes from an education standpoint too. Like the Roma year is such a great example, because Roma, I knew that Green Book was in it, and sometimes a journalist will say that, and then people think like you're clickbait or you're spewing. Like, that's one of the hardest things about this job, is educating the public on how the voting practices work. Because at the Oscars for Best Picture, it's not just check off and you're done. There's a preferential ballot. You rank things from 1 to 9. You need 50% plus 1 to win Best Picture. I knew that if Roma couldn't clinch in that first round, it was over. There was a Netflix bias at the time. It was a foreign film. And, Green Book definitely didn't get a lot of #1 votes, but it lived in 2s, 3s, and 4s. And I knew back during Toronto, and that it won the audience award at Toronto. Like, I knew it was a crowd pleaser. Again, hindsight 2020.
Jojo Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit as well. Like, it happens all the time, and people only pay attention to the Academy part of it. But because people like Claudia and I are in the trenches for so long, we see how the tides change at any given moment. Like, Nomadland felt good all year, but that doesn't happen a lot. I can only think back to maybe Schindler's List, of a movie that, like, when it came out, we're like, yeah, it's over. It does. It goes up and down all the time.
So we had, our team had a lot of debating about, well, we didn't have that many funds anyway, but like, do we spend money on advertising, and promote, like, do we put out ads and this and that? That's going to be very costly. What do you think? But people do it, what do you think about that? Do you think that makes a difference in terms of, well, it seems like it would help get the word out. What do you think?
I mean, it helps, but you're looking for a formula that, like, if everyone knew the formula, then everyone would just do it. Every film is I mean, look at someone like Michael Moore, who makes documentaries. Bowling for Columbine is one of the best documentaries ever made. And I'm pretty sure still, if I went outside and just grabbed someone on the street and said, hey, you ever seen Bowling for Columbine? They would look at me like I have 2 heads. But then if I say Avatar, people know what I'm talking about. And I haven't rewatched Avatar since it came out, because it just, some things are great at the moment and then it just subsides. So when it comes to advertising and marketing, yeah, like, it matters, but sometimes you find a life somewhere else. I'm just really, again, a terrible example, but it's the first thing that came to mind. I'm thinking of Troll 2, which is like, it's supposed to be like one of the worst movies ever made, and it is, but it's so awesome, and it found a life afterwards, and now a cult classic. They have like midnight screenings. They made a documentary about making the best worst movie ever made. It's like, and I'll watch it maybe once a year, just because I want to, like, have a good time. Like, every movie, every piece of art has its moment. Like, Van Gogh cut off his ear. Like, every artist, just goes through it, and you don't know what's going to work until it just does. I didn't know I was going to work at Variety until they called me and asked me to come work here. Like, that's I would have never came here. There's a saying that someone used to say to me, you make a plan and God laughs. And I usually say that God's cracking up often when I'm talking out loud. So it's the same thing, I think, with art.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you make a good point, and let me know if 2 of you agree with this, in that, while it would, of course, be wonderful to win an Academy Award, there's value
in not winning
effort, but at the same time, there's so many beautiful films out there that have never, like you're speaking about. I'm writing down Waves, Diane, Blue Bayou. There's so many other. So I guess, what advice we're getting close to the time. So what advice would you give filmmakers in terms of their aspirations, and at what point do you think it's appropriate to aspire to get an Academy Award, and at what point is it appropriate to take another route, to get your film known and seen? Like, how would you advise a filmmaker in this regard?
I would say never aspire to win an Academy Award. That's, if you're in it for awards, not a good reason, right? We all know that. You know that as an artist. Your aspiration is about expressing yourself, about telling something that you absolutely have to tell. You have a passion to tell. If awards come,
I was telling Larry.
She's right. If awards come, great, but that's not why you do anything, right? You do it because you have to do it. You do it because you are dying to do it, and when you hear back from people who saw it and they're moved by it, that's the best. Award is it's almost immaterial, or I guess immaterial at worst and maybe icing on the cake at best. But I just think, it will mean that more people will see it. But okay, that's
you do it for the love of the game. Like you're not doing it for the trophy at the end.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for that, then don't do it. And people will know why you're doing it. Like it looks like you're just chasing an Oscar. People
we all see those shorts where people go, "Oh, it's about World War II. Oh, they won an Oscar."
Yeah, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's not like, listen, DiCaprio for years got dubbed, he was chasing an Oscar, and I really don't believe he was. But some people said, look at the type of projects he's taken on. The narrative is whatever people want it to be.
Any the worse of an actress because she's been nominated 7 or 8 times, and no.
Yeah, and I always feel like that's a great, like Peter O'Toole left this world without an Oscar in hand. He had 8 nominations. He's the most nominated actor to not win an Academy Award. I feel like that's a pretty okay badge to have. Like Cary Grant left this world without an Oscar. It's the great Richard Burton, Albert Finney, the greatest artists. Like I say this often to people, not everyone should win an Academy Award. Because you know what happens? Al Pacino wins for Scent of a Woman. That's what happens.
Mercedes Rule wins for Fisher King, and we never get it.
Al Pacino wins for Scent of a Woman, which should have been Denzel's, and then we do Denzel for Training Day, which isn't bad, but
it's good.
There's better Denzel stuff. It messes up the lineage.
We should do a special New Filmmaker LA Oscar party with you guys there. It was so much fun with you.
Okay, we're in.
Okay, we should do that. That would be so wonderful. Well, this was a really great discussion. It was so much fun. And I really appreciate both your responses and, it was just a wonderful conversation. I think Rich for the filmmaker.
At the Wall. Is it still on HBO Max? Ending at the Wall?
Yes, it is. It is.
I'm gonna watch it.
Make some time for it. See?
Yeah.
And this is how you do it. This is dynamic, natural marketing. It didn't cost you a dime.
Larry is a good friend.
Yeah.
He just want to advise me to bring it up. So, well, thank you guys so much. We're going to open it up to Q&A, and I look forward to getting together in person, doing this. We should do like an Oscar party with you guys there. So much fun.
Let's do it.
Great.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Good to talk with you.
Great talking with you too. So now I think Andrew is going to come in.
Yes. Thanks, Varda. Thanks, Claudia. Thanks, Clayton, for that great conversation. That was a lot of fun.
I just want to thank, sorry, I'm on a shoot leaving to New York tomorrow morning, so I have to step out, but I want to thank you guys again. I want to thank all the filmmakers who showed up today, and Telefilm, and we just really love collaborating with you guys, and keep going, okay? Lots of love. Mwah.
On your shoot.
Thank you, Varda.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Varda. First up is, well, first of all, I want to say, let's try to keep it to 1 and 2 questions. And number 2, let's not ask Claudia or Clayton to like review your movie or anything, or like don't pitch your movie or anything like that. All right. So first up is.
Wait, can I pitch my movie? No.
Go ahead, Clayton. No, Clayton, you can. Go ahead.
No,
Clayton,
I have
Claudia,
no movie.
feel free.
No, it's the rules first.
For sure. So first up is Patricia. So Patricia, I'm asking to unmute you.
Hello, Claudia and Clayton. Thank you for this great information you're providing. I have a question regarding exclusives. especially for variety or the big trades, what would be the best practice when you don't have a named talent, but you've been selected to a significant festival that we know you are already covering? And you must get tons of emails. So what is the best way to reach out to offer the exclusive?
Well, exclusives are always loved. So yes, exclusives are great. Yeah, unfortunately, that is the thing we get offered all the time. Like, here's an exclusive, like, my poster, my trailer, that's, there's always an angle. But it's about, I always say you can be persistent, but be kind, build relationships with journalists, as many as possible, so you can get the end goal that you're seeking. But I would say, reach out. Like, if one person says no, send it to someone else. Like, get to know the people that are writing at those publications.
Sometimes it happens that I assume you get a lot of emails and we don't get a response, but we are under a deadline. Should we follow up, or if you don't respond, it means you're not interested?
Always follow up.
Follow up,
okay.
Yeah. I am a rare breed that, like, will make sure at the end of the day I have 0 emails, but like that's not a thing often. So yeah, following up is always boring, because it slips our mind, and then that follow up catches me at the right time. I'm like, oh yeah, let me do this.
No, sometimes it's that person who sent the 3rd follow up, and I'm embarrassed that it's a 3rd follow up, and it's like, okay. So it's the most tenacious, persistent people that I think.
Yeah. As long as you're kind, remember, just make sure that kindness is attached.
Kindness is everything in this industry. So thank you so much for answering my question.
Yeah, no problem. I have a policy. Part of my French, I have a no assholes policy. That's why usually I'll answer nice emails.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. Next question is in chat. Is from Sophia. Does a name actor really matter to get reviewed or get an exclusive announcement? Most Canadian films don't have a known cast, so how can we get your attention? Through a publicist, through an award? Could you please break it down for us?
Claudia, you want to start?
Sure. So the question was about if a name actor is necessary, and what was the additional part?
Yeah, so to get reviewed or an exclusive announcement, how necessary is like a name actor? Because most Canadian films don't have a known cast, so I'm wondering how to get your attention.
Yeah, I don't think a name actor is essential, but again, it depends on the publication. It's an interesting question, because I teach a class, and I had someone who made his first film, and he had a very, very micro budget film, and he took $10,000 out of that micro budget, which was maybe like a sixth of it, to have Danny Trejo be in for like 5 minutes of his film or 10 minutes of his film. I don't know that was essential, but that was, he made that choice. I think if you've got a really interesting concept, I think concept can sometimes be just as good as, I've got Danny Trejo, or I've got Leonardo DiCaprio, or whoever. I mean, if you say this is a film that was made during the pandemic, they did this, or, this is a, all women, or, not that it has to be a gimmick, but I'm just saying something that makes it stand out from other films. So both the storyline, the concept, what makes it stand out, something. I think that can be just as attention getting as having a big star. What do you think, Clayton?
Yeah. Find your connection and your angle, and that's how because big obviously big names will help. People will write about Brad Pitt's new movie naturally, but if the cinematographer is James Laxton, I'm obsessing about Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk Again, and like that's an angle that would interest me. Like that's what I say, when you get to know the journalists at the publication, really get to know them, like know what they like. Like some people will know that like if there's any slight little lineage, to If Beale Street Could Talk, I got Kiki Lane in my movie, that I'll perk my ears up and pay attention. So get to know them and just find find the angle that works, and also like, if you can get through the technical side, like at Variety, we have the artisans editor, Jazz Sankey, writes all about below the line. Like maybe that's your way in. Like, oh, we have the composer from, the Underground Railroad, Nicholas Britell. So, he's on this film. Like find those connections and then just, for lack of a better term, exploit them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the issues where sometimes people will pitch something to you and they don't really know what it is you do. So read, if there's like, make sure you know those things about Clayton, or other people know what our taste is, what we have written about before. No, I get music pitches a lot. I love music, but that's not what I write about. That's not what I review. So, kind of know, who you're very, be targeted, read a lot, have a sense of who you were targeting.
And I'm sure you guys know this, but I just feel like I should say it just for anyone who can bring this to someone else. Don't cite our ethnicity as the reason why we should write about this either. Like, I think that's the worst reason to give. I so many people are like, oh, I have a Latino in my movie and you're Latino. I'm like, oh, like there's a lot of Latinos in the world. So yeah, let's be authentic and particular about what we're doing.
But on the other hand, if you know that diversity is something that we really value, and you want to point that out, it's worth pointing out, of course. But yeah.
Right. Another question in chat from Katja. Do your media outlets have reviewers particularly interested in feature documentaries, or do all reviewers also cover documentaries?
Usually depends on the publication. So our chief film critics are Peter DeBruge and Owen Gleiberman, and they write both. But we also now have a doc channel on Variety that we're actively seeking out documentary content. So there is a lead person on that as well. So it just varies publication to publication, and obviously there are freelance critics that will write about some items as well. So you just, again, pitch the movie as is. Documentaries I say have the hardest time because I think that's the most oversaturated market right now, like in terms of what's being submitted and what people are looking to get reviewed. Last year, there were 288 documentaries submitted for the Oscars, the most in history. And I know that voters didn't watch maybe 30 of them, per voter. Some really do put in the time, but it's hard. Docs is a very hot thing right now, which is why I'm pushing so much for like a doc and best picture, things like that, because we are in this golden age of documentary filmmaking. I'm aware of that, but there is just so much of it.
Yeah, there's been some really great docs, and I think there used to be kind of a good for you aspect to documentaries, and now it's, I think reality TV changed a lot of that, but I think in general there is a much greater appetite for documentary films. And what you could do, I mean, one thing you can do is look at people's 10 best lists, because I used to do 10 best lists and I'd have like 5 of them be documentaries. And for like if you see people that have a lot of documentaries on their best lists, obviously they're, that's something that they're drawn to. They see a lot of them.
Yep.
Great. Just a reminder, we still have some time for a few more questions. So if you want to raise your hands or send me a question privately, please do so. Next is Christian. It's also from chat. So he says, with the impact of big award shows such as the Oscars has on diversity and inclusion, whether positively or negatively, what would you say are other mainstream ways to improve diversity and inclusion in an industry that still has too many quote unquote firsts?
Oh, I think there's a lot of ways that you can improve it. One simple way is just, make sure that all the people on your crew, we don't look at like below the line diversity. Sometimes we think a lot about the cast or the director, but and obviously the screenwriter, someone who's telling the story, they're telling a story about their experiences, about their community. That means a lot. But I think diversity is a lot of different things. And as we discussed before, it's not necessarily just Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. That's all important. But it's, LGBTQ, it's disabled, it's all kinds of, there's diversity. Basically, anybody who's not an able-bodied white man, I guess, cisgender, there's so much, there's diverse stories you can tell, but I think that it's, there are people who, I think it's somebody at the Annenberg School. I can't remember if it's Annenberg. There's two women who've written studies about this, and one is out of UC San Diego, one is out of USC's Annenberg School. But anyway, one person said, make every third or fifth character be a person of color. If a role is written for somebody that is a lawyer or a doctor or a grocer, you don't necessarily have a person's ethnicity or gender in mind. Cast that person, differently. And again, look for people on your crew. Just embrace a sense of inclusion, and don't just get people who look exactly like you. We all feel comfortable with people who look and think like us. So let's get out of those comfort zones and find people who don't look and think like us.
Yeah, it's really well said, Claudia. And I'll add to that, saying my simple advice is we need to have a real honest conversation about representation and diversity and race. We just haven't had it. There are a lot of studios and organizations that are playing lip service on, we're going to be diverse and all that because they want some good ink out of it. I won't name the actor, but everyone knows that the Golden Globes are having their moment right now. And when the day that Tom Cruise gave his Golden Globes back, an actor who had won a Golden Globe called me and asked, "Hey, I don't want to give my Golden Globe back, but can I give back nominations?" And I was flummoxed from it. And I was and it was just you're not in this for you don't understand what we're doing this for. We need to have that real honest conversation about it. And I will say this also, and this coming as a person of color, I'm Black and Latino. I often say and believe Blacks and Latinos can be harder on me than white people ever could. We have to know and expand the conversation of what we're talking about and have a conversation with each other. In the Heights was a perfect example. The colorism debate came up and Latinos didn't want to have that conversation. And I had written about that well before In the Heights. We have our own race issue that we need to discuss, and nobody wanted to bite, and we're seeing some strides to because again, race conversations are uncomfortable, and they should be uncomfortable because there's a lot of history of hurt that's there. But until we address it, we'll never have true representation across the board.
We definitely have to have those conversations. Absolutely. And that's one of the best things that's come out of, we've had the Black Lives Matter movement. I think this has been a really good year to have those awkward conversations. We've had all the horrible Asian hate crimes. This is a time to have that conversation, have it on a set, have it, wherever you're working, and have it, with your friends, just, so that it's top of mind, so that we, and acknowledge our privilege and all those things.
Great. Looks like we have time for maybe a couple more questions, or maybe just one. We'll see. It's from Tanessa. It's in chat. Let's see here. Are there any oh no, that's Kavan. Actually, Tanessa, I don't think has a question. Let's see if a critic. I guess I'm going to say maybe you have something to say about this. If a critic has given a poor review, is it worth reaching out to delve into constructive criticism, or just learn from the interview and move on to the next project? Yeah, that's actually a question.
I like that question.
Yeah.
I would be perfectly happy to give constructive criticism and try to explain why. What I've noticed some people do, and it's not necessarily the filmmaker. I've had, fans of a film write to me and say, you were completely off base, blah, 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 blah. And I would always write back, and they'd be like, oh, I never thought you'd write back, and then if they were angry, which they often were, you're an idiot. I would it would take the wind out of their sails a little bit to have someone just respond and say, okay, I see the passion with, that you are approaching this with, and here's what I think, and here's why I think that. And then the other person would write back and say, oh, I think this. And then it becomes a real conversation, a discussion, a dialogue. And I wish there was more of that, frankly, because it's just, again, it is just one person's opinion. I've learned from what other people have told me. My mind has been, my ideas have been expanded. I've looked at things in a different way. So why not? I mean, sometimes people are busy, and it depends on how you do it. Going back to Clayton's thing about being kind. It'd be better if you did it with kindness. I mean, what I have found with these, people would start off angry and then they would get kind because I would respond to them as calmly as I could, and usually that begets kindness. But yeah, if you say, I'm approaching this because I want some constructive criticism, I think people would respond favorably to that.
Yeah, I say Twitter muscles are real sometimes. Like, you can throw out anything in a few, 140 or 280 characters. And then when there's a response like, oh, wait, I didn't actually think I wanted to have a dialogue about this. But it is on a lot of journalists. And listen, I'm not 100% there, but I'd say I'm like 80% there of when I don't like something, of being able to speak with the filmmaker about what I like it, like face. If they ask me, then I'll tell them. But to have a dialogue, it can be uncomfortable, and for filmmakers, a lot, they're not seeking to understand, they're seeking to defend. They want to say like, no, you're wrong because of this. Like, art is art. Again, art is subjective, just like I said before. But I remember being at a film festival and I saw a film, and there was a luncheon afterwards, and one of the producers was there, and I loved the movie. And they sat me with them, and I was talking. I was like, "Oh my god, I love it!" Blah blah. I was like, I always get very particular about going to these luncheons because what if I don't like the movie, and I have to sit there and be like, "Hi," whatever. But I was like, "But don't worry, I like the movie." And I was like, and then he said, "Oh, but I had this other movie from earlier in the year," and he named it. I was like, "Oh." And then he was like, "But you said you wouldn't lie to me, so what did you think about it?" And I was like, well, I didn't, and then we were able to have a really good conversation. But then he gave me a lot of stuff. Claudia, I know you get this, a lot of off the record conversations. You get to find out, like, listen, studio, like, I was like, the movie was too long. He was like, I wanted 90 minutes. And the studio was like, no, like, you get all those little bits and you go like, that's why the movie didn't work, and you get some of that insight. And obviously filmmakers will get the blame a lot of the time. Sometimes it's not your fault at all. It's just powers that be that don't know any better.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually found out, like, after the fact sometimes, where people, it always surprises me who reads reviews, because I always think they don't, they kind of fall on deaf ears. I remember once running into Matt Damon. He's like, "Thank you for the 3.5-star review for Born something," whichever one it was, Born Legacy. And I'm just, or Supremacy. I'm like, okay, you knew the actual star count. And Dwayne Johnson once told someone that he paid attention and like he appreciated some advice or some guidance or something. And I'm like, what? So, but most of the time, other times you run into someone and they go, "Oh, I think you've liked some of my movies, but some of them you haven't liked." And it is awkward to say that, to have that conversation. But I think you can always find something positive. I guess if you could leave from that point of view, you could, if somebody approaches you. I've also had people write really nasty letters and just say, defending someone. It's okay. I mean, it's all fine. It's just opinions, and there's no reason not to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And we can all learn something from the conversation.
Right.
I love this Bianca question that she put in the chat.
Oh, I've never had that happen. Have you?
I've got, so what if we want to read it first?
All right, I'll read it first.
And I'll answer it.
Have you or the publication you work for ever got a call from a studio executive because you wrote a bad review for one of their movies that was supposed to be a potential award contender? It's a good question.
Yes. And again, and it's happened when I was running award circuit. It's even happened, and I don't write reviews at Variety anymore, as much anymore. I'm writing about awards analysis and a lot of other things, and their powers that be, they go up. But Variety, because they have integrity, and because I had integrity when I was at award circuit, editorial freedom, if it doesn't exist, then
what are we doing?
Free press is dead. Like you have to have the ability to say what you want. And listen, studios will strategize. If they're just pretending Claudia and I are at the same publication, they'll look at us and say, like, we'll invite Claudia because Clayton may not like it. Like, they get to know our taste and what, and sometimes it's just a straight gamble. But yeah, there's a like, one thing I learned very early on, you know, we gave advice earlier about don't do it for awards. How much people love awards. Like, it is so important, and they will never let you forget it. Like, you know, and then they'll try to blame you, say because of you that this, like, no, like the fact that you think I have that much power is, I wish I did. I wish I had. I wish I could say something and people would listen to me. God, can you imagine? So much would be solved today.
No, yeah, that's never happened to me because I think people would know better than to do that. Certainly at the LA Times or USA Today. But I did have a studio executive once tell me, it was years ago, and it was a movie called Half Nelson that Ryan Gosling was in before Ryan Gosling was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I championed it and said, you know, if there's any justice, he'll get an Academy Award nomination way early on, and he did. And so this studio executive wrote to me and said, you know, it was Lisa Schwartzbaum for Entertainment Weekly. That's how long ago this was, and me. And he said the two of you got this whole Oscar campaign rolling, and that was interesting. But that I've heard that, but I've never heard anyone say, you know, how dare you not like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of those. Those are the good ones, the ones that they call them. They say because of you, we got this. And even then, I'm still like, no, we didn't. Like, there are some people.
Of course not. Yeah. It was because it was a good performance. But I mean, I was super vocal about how much I despise Green Book with every fiber of my being. And you know, I never heard from anybody. Universal.
Interesting point. I don't hate Green Book. I think it should have won Best Picture? No, but I think it's an okay movie. Saying that out loud gets you flack. I got calls to me from like how, like, you don't think this is offensive, like trying to tell me like you're right about diversity and you don't find this like, and that is where I'm saying like it's the monster feeding the monster constantly.
Yeah.
Great. Looks like we have time for one more. It's from Kavan in chat. Are there any circumstances outside of Oscar nominations where your outlets are likely to write about a short film, either documentary or fiction?
That's a good question. Yes. Remember when Kobe made that short film? People wrote about that. There are a couple short films that were written about this year, but it's usually they have to be Oscar nominated. I'm trying to think of short films that have been written about that have not had that Oscar nomination patina.
Yeah, I think literally we wrote about one today. Alan S. Kim, he's in a new short, and I think we wrote about it today. So yeah, like when I talk about there's so many movies, I know there are a million more shorts. Like there are so many shorts, and I would love to cover shorts. I remember having when I first started at Variety, I had a really frank conversation, you know, with the Academy, in which I told them, if you're hell-bent on keeping the shorts a part of the show, which I think you should, because that's where we see so much diversity and so much, like, you know, so many new voices. If you're hell-bent on doing that, it's incumbent upon you to do a better job at educating the public. Because what are the shorts during the award show? They're the bathroom breaks. Because no one knows what they are. And I know there are so many, like, you know, listen, Kobe Bryant, Dear Basketball, once a millennia that people actually care about a short. You know, that's also why Jeff Goldblum is an Oscar nominee. It's the only reason why, because he has a short nomination, you know? So like there's a lot, but not every famous person needs to get into that space, you know? It was interesting. Pedro Almodovar, The Human Voice, which I loved, was a short this year. He didn't get nominated. And I heard from a lot of branch members that said, that category isn't for the Pedros, it's for the newcomers. Like it was a reverse like thing, like you're too established to do a short. You needed to do something else. You need to go somewhere else, you know, and it becomes really interesting dialogue. But yeah, publications would love to write about everything in Hollywood. If there's unlimited manpower and we could hire 1 million people, we would. Yeah. But there's so little of us.
I wish, you know, maybe like freelancers or who write about shorts. Like I think about the shorts at Sundance. A lot of them were like calling cards for what was Damien Chazelle's Whiplash. He did a short that later became Whiplash, right? And you think, oh, I wish I'd been the person to write about that short that led to that. So, you know, I think I wish that was something that people paid more attention to, because there's some amazing shorts. There are short film festivals. That, you know, there's all kinds of. Unfortunately, it does become a calling card, which is, you know, that is fine. But in terms of publications writing about it, I mean, I've seen people, again, tweet about it or something. But unfortunately, a lot of publications will not pay enough attention.
Yeah.
Awesome. Clayton, I know you have to run out of here, but do you maybe have time for one more quick question? I got a good one in chat. Do you have time for
Sure.
one?
Go ahead. Only
Thanks,
because you
Clayton.
asked politely. See, being nice helps.
Thanks, Clayton. So it's in chat from Patricia. If you really disliked a debut feature from a new filmmaker, would you still write that first negative review for that filmmaker? What would be your approach?
Yeah, like, yeah, we can't, like, I always, I like to have frank conversations with people. Like, if you're going to get into this space, you have to be prepared for it all, and understand that you're never, and this coming from, for me also, like, writing about diversity. I have a video series that just launched last week at Variety called The Talk. It's every Friday. You're never going to be everyone's cup of tea, and you have to accept that if you're going to put something out there like art and you want it to be seen, you have to be prepared for the people that call it a masterpiece and the people that say it's trash, and be okay hearing both. It's not, I'm saying it's easy. I think I'm saying it very too, like too nonchalantly, but it's something that everyone has to learn. So if you're a debut filmmaker and and I have the opportunity to review it, and it got to my, got to, and it's not good, I have to, share that.
I'll do a slightly different policy that we adhere to on Film Week. I agree in theory that, of course, people need to be able to take it. But what we do on Film Week is, a lot of times if there's 2 or 3 critics and we didn't like something, it's a brand new film, we come to the conclusion, like, why are we going to piss all over this film? It's, it doesn't, it's, why say anything at all? And let's just let it be. There are some people that would think, well, bad publicity is better than no publicity. At least the word would be out and someone would mention it. But it's not to say that we don't give bad reviews of things, but sometimes if it's a really tiny film and it's just, playing at one theater and we all hated it, why when there's so many other films, there's literally like 14 films opening and we have plenty of it, we want to focus on those other ones. So that's been kind of a newer policy.
It's a good policy to have. Yeah, and it shouldn't be fun for a critic to crap all over a movie. Like, sometimes you can't give just like, we're just gonna leave it be. But then you have to be honest about it too. Like, when they ask, like, why have you reviewed my movie? But, like, I didn't like it. You have to be ready to hear those things. So.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Let's give a big round of applause to Clayton and Claudia, who are both incredible. They're always lending their time to independent filmmakers and trying to make the industry a better, brighter place. Thank you all for joining us and sticking with us throughout the day for these 3 panels. And hopefully we will see all of you at In Focus Canadian Cinema starting tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Good night to those who are in the East Coast. And for all of you in LA, enjoy a cocktail. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, guys. Thank you.